All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. It is time to talk about Temple slash Flare slash David Bowie slash Lizzie and how good they are. Temple has really impressed me with how, like, kind of just super interesting this Warframe is in terms of kind of some new mechanical stuff that I hope we see more of in the future, alongside just being super solid. I had some concerns about their survivability before their release, but really, that has not been a problem at all due to how good Temple's 3 is. With that, in terms of how good they are, we do have some shards here. This is 2 Tau casting speed shards, and these are really, really nice to have, not necessary at all. The casting speed really helps, especially particularly with Ripper's Wail, because Ripper's Wail is quite a long casting time without them, but everything is still totally functional and great without it. It's not necessary, just makes things a lot smoother. For that, the rest of the build probably looks a little strange. That mostly being that we are running both Redirection and Vitality, and it's not 2014 anymore. The reason we're running Archon Vitality is pretty much only and purely for its passive. The additional heat procs are really, really powerful, and kind of it's the best way to increase damage on what we're doing with Temple. So the additional 100% health is kind of just a bonus. If you have an unranked Archon Vitality, you can actually save some Forma here, and you really don't need the health at all. I basically never take health damage with Temple, so feel free to tone that down if you don't want to spend the 5 Forma that this build is. Similarly, we're on Redirection. As I mentioned, Redirection is much better than it appears here because whenever you cast Ripper's Wail, you fully max out your overshield, meaning that you get to like 2,000 shields. And if you have 2,000 shields and the ability to press a button and turn them back on whenever you want, the Primed Redirection and Arcane Aegis do a lot of heavy lifting, especially alongside Adaptation, to make sure we're basically never under any threat. And that is with the on top of invulnerability you can get by using Ripper's Wail at the right timing. Other stuff in the build is basically for dealing damage. We are on Primed Flow because our energy economy, we just kind of want a lot of energy, because if we're using the passive for Temple, we're going to get a free 50% efficiency. That free 50% efficiency also means it's very, very easy to run Blind Rage for doubling our strength. And we're also running Transient Fortitude and Augur Secrets for even more strength. Now, the flex spot in this build is very easily this Streamline. This can be a few different things. I have put Stretch here. Streamline is here, obviously, right now. I've tried some of the other Augur mods, and really, this is kind of up to taste. It actually feels like it's kind of tailor-made to be a future augment slot, because like what you put here is like so versatile and like could be so many things, and like a lot of it doesn't super matter depending on the situation. That this slot feels pretty free, which also, of course, can lower the cost of the build if you just put nothing there, which will be just fine. Otherwise, for the Arcanes, we are on our Arcane Aegis. Of course, that is with the, just like making it so we're invulnerable anytime that this procs is very, very good. And then Molt Augmented for an additional 60% strength, as strength affects all of the damage output of what we're doing. We're also on Corrosive Projection up here. This could probably be a lot of different mods. If you wanted to put Brief Respite up here, if like you don't want to run Augur Secrets and stuff like that, all very reasonable. But Corrosive Projection is just like kind of default good because we're not going to be stripping armor on Temple, so it's just a little bit of a damage up in that way. Otherwise, though, you'll note that I do not have anything subsumed on Temple, and I really haven't felt the need to do so. It is notable that Ripper's Wail restricts you from putting things like Roar on this. You are not allowed to combine like Roar or Eclipse, which is an unfortunate downside for the defensive things you could go for, alongside Ripper's Wail. So keep that into consideration, because normally you would be removing Overdrive, as I think Overdrive is overall Temple's weakest ability, but it also gives you a pretty large amount of crit chance, so there's really no reason to subsume over it unless you really think you need more defenses, but with the setup that I have here, I really don't feel like I need more defenses. Otherwise, Pyrotechnics and the Exalted Solo do quite a bit to just, like, murder everything. I will say that Pyrotechnics at very high levels starts to kind of fall off, but is still very useful for killing chaff. But Exalted Solo is just incredible. And of course, because it is an Exalted weapon, it is separately moddable. Lizzie is a flamethrower. It's a beam weapon. It's basically Exalted Ignis, which is, of course, exceedingly good. This is the build that I landed on for it, which there's kind of a lot to talk about with it. First and foremost, it doesn't use ammo in the traditional sense. You build up ammo by properly using your abilities. So things like Vial Acceleration are very good here, and Fire Rate just on beams is pretty good in general. We are on Sinister Reach. Sinister Reach is, the beam is not the longest thing in the world, so investing to the point where you get Sinister Reach is a really, really big boost. This is a 3-form build in total. I will say magnetic capacity is entirely to taste. You do not get the magazine capacity benefit from this, unfortunately, but the magnetic helps you with the one thing that Lizzie can sometimes have trouble with, which is very, very quickly killing Exami, because you are mostly a status weapon, which means you're going to be slower getting through Overguard. Adding the magnetic makes it so that getting through Overguard takes seconds at absolute worst at even like super, super high levels. So this is really the anti-Eximus slot. This could be quite a few different things if you wanted it to be. Like you could even just like swap to Serration or whatnot, or any given number of other things. But we are on primary merciless for our Serration stat. There's not really much else to put up in this slot that you could swap to. Crux is an option, but the status is already so good that I really don't feel like it's necessary. And this weapon is like a little odd with getting headshots. I did try this with Deadhead, but found that it was not triggering like very consistently for me. So you could use this, but I really find that Merciless is just hyper consistency on getting that damage bonus, and it's what I want because of that. Otherwise, not a huge amount to talk about other than how the abilities work. Obviously, in terms of our passive, we do have this like metronome in the middle here, and you want to cast your abilities in the center. You can cast all of your abilities just like off nothing, which is very good. And just to quickly talk about like what the ability kind of like core here is, you want to hit your 3, and whenever you hit your 3, you can see in the top right, we're going to have a very large heat buff. That is 236% heat, starts at 222, I believe, which is an incredible heat buff on its own. That, as you cast your 1 and your 2 and hit enemies with it, goes up to a top cap of 750%, which is incredibly high. And due to the fix that we got in this patch, that is also going to be increasing the multiplier to the heat procs that we're going to be inflicting on enemies through R4, because it is affecting the weapon. So that is a lot of damage that we're going to be able to do. Obviously, as you saw in the build, I'm a little bit lower on duration, so you do have to cast your 3 like relatively often. But you'll note that because of the casting speed, I'm actually invincible for quite a while whenever I cast my 3. So the more you cast your 3, you're just going to cast it, be invincible for a short clip, and then of course with the massive shield that we have, we're going to be invincible if it breaks, and we want to be casting our 3 semi-regularly anyway. So most of the time we're either invincible or have a massive shield, so there's very, very little chance of us dying. It's also worth noting, because it will maybe come up in the future, whenever you cast 3, that invincibility is no longer considered an ability, which means it cannot be nullified, which I think is an important factor, because it means you are truly and completely invincible, unless something like Rolling Guard. So that is all very, very cool and good. The meter in the middle there, you can see it's orange now. That is your ammo for Lizzie. Lizzie actually does not cost any energy as long as you cast it on the beat. Otherwise, you will pay 100 to bring Lizzie out. But like it being a free ability that then doesn't cost anything to shoot, it just costs that meter. And that meter refills up pretty quickly anytime you cast your 1 on the beat or your 2 on the beat. You are going to get a lot of that ammo back. So once you've got Lizzie out, it pretty much is just a completely free ability. Other things that are notable about Lizzie, and this is the interesting design space stuff that I mentioned earlier, is whenever you aim down sight, all of your abilities change. And I want to say straight up, first and foremost, obviously there's magnetic on here. This is too clunky, I think, to like realistically be used, but it is a very interesting design space, I think, going forward for future Warframes, because the thing that you get here is like anytime you hit these abilities, you basically get like a pulse that is that element that you are shooting out. And that is very cool, and you can spam them and fire the main fire at the same time, which can, like, you know, kill enemies that you're looking at. But the things that requires from you are, like, whenever you ADS, your fingers go off WASD and onto 1, 2, 3, 4 if you want to spam all these elements, and then you're also holding right-click and left-click. So you can't move while doing this unless you, like, do some stuff to, like, macro out of it, which is, you know, pretty clunky. It's also, like, these don't, like, do enough damage to be regularly worth using. They're mostly really just adding the elements onto the enemies. I think if their damage was higher, it'd be really interesting as a, like, maybe you're in, like, Disruption, let's say, for example, and use ADS, start shooting the flamethrower, and then it's actually worth it to kill the Disruption targets quickly to spam all these out. Of course, you could go something like the Aptitude effect in order to have those extra elements also turn into damage, but that is, like, you know, pretty niche for a, you know, ability I'm not usually going to be using that way. Normally, you're just going to be shooting the flamethrower and burning it all down in front of you, as we're going to show. So with that, spawn in the usual suspects. I will show this both like with AI on and AI off. So just with like base 3, this is not built up like at all. The damage is quite good. It is Exalted Ignis, as I mentioned, and it burns enemies down very, very effectively. That is without me using my 2 at all. So whenever you use your 2, of course, you get the crit buff on all the enemies that you hit. And this is also one of the reasons why you could consider Stretch in this build, is because it will increase the range specifically of this ability pretty significantly if you can include Stretch somewhere. So if you're using your 2 more often, that's pretty good. I will say the reason why your 2 would usually be your Subsume is because it is the only ability that needs range, which is like, you know, if you could just dump range completely, that would be maybe beneficial. Though your 1 will use it a little bit as well, though not as much, as its base range is very, very good. Not needing to really worry about that range at all and having a different damage boost is maybe desirable, though. But yeah, that is what's going on. We're going to unpause the AI and just absolutely trounce these guys. Turning our 3 on, obviously we're just invincible, and we just have infinite time to do whatever. You can see the damage output of the 1 here. If I just, like, in the top, you can see that going up to 288. Just, like, being able to clear chaff here pretty well. You can see, like, no real problems with survivability. Worst case scenario, I turn my 3 on. You do have to, like, you know, keep in time with the metronome is desirable, of course, because you are going to miss out on 50% efficiency and some bonus effects on your abilities if you are not keeping it up. But yeah, it's just, you have a very, very potent flamethrower. You have an incredibly, like, high-powered damage buff that also restores your shields and makes you invincible for a short time. You have, like, a crit vulnerability and then, like, a 1 that clears chaff enemies, especially at lower levels. You're just going to, like, kill an entire group anytime you press 1. I'm not even going to need to be firing Lizzie, so it's kind of just a really tight and complete package here. Like, you're just getting some really solid performance. If you like the Ignis, and it's like, if your favorite weapon in the game is the Ignis, you're probably going to play a lot of Temple. So with that, let's just take this into Steel Path and show it off. I will note that we are going into Tav, and the important thing there is that every enemy on Tav does have a 50% resistance to heat damage. So it's actually kind of a higher level test than it would normally be, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for Temple whatsoever. So let's jump into that. All right, time to jump into Tav. But yeah, very, very happy with Temple overall. I think there's, like, they kind of just nailed the theme. Like, it feels very, like, it feels very Rockstar. We can just spend some energy at the beginning here to fill up our meter. Turn Lizzie on as well. Max out that shield real quick. And just start getting to it. As you can see, the 50% resistance to heat damage, not going to matter a huge amount. Refilling that meter as well. You can really spam very hard, like, especially if you're, like, on the beat pretty easily with this. You can do some stuff with this. Just refilling our shield back up and getting that invincibility. Just burning it down, really. You also, it is worth noting that, like, some situations that you can set up with this is if you were in a survival with Temple, theoretically you could, like, find a dead end and, like, just aim down a hallway and just spam. But, probably not, like, a real, like, normal use of the ability, honestly. Probably not, like, something that's, like, particularly worth doing either. As there's weapons that have unlimited ammo that can just do that at most levels of play anyway. Like, just doing that in the hallway with Nataruk is already very much a thing. Just keeping up our buff here. We're only at, like, 300% of our buff, so we have another 400% damage to be added over the course of just, like, using our 1 and all that business. It is also worth noting that you do get additional, part of the reason why the 20-second timer on R3 doesn't super matter is because if we are using our 1, which also fills up our 4 and so on and so forth, we do get more time on the clock for our 3. One of the downsides to that, though, is you do go back down to your time whenever you use your 3 again, which can maybe be a little annoying sometimes, as like if you've built up to like, 50 seconds off your timer or whatever, casting your 3 lowering your timer feels a little unfortunate. That could also honestly be a bug, though. There's a few buggy abilities in this update that we're kind of waiting for some hotfixes on, and that might be a thing that just like kind of slipped through the cracks, so that actually might be changed, and I wouldn't be too surprised if it is actually a bug. But you can see in terms of like output here, like if I can see the enemy and they're within flamethrower range, they're pretty much just gonna die to the immense amount of heat procs we're kicking out. We're kicking out, plenty of viral procs alongside that as well. Our heat weighting does get more aggressive as we cast our abilities, and we get closer to that 750%. So you're going to get more and more heat proc weighting as you are going up in the buff. But it's not like that's really a bad thing, because like you'll get fewer viral procs, but anything that's like surviving probably wants you to get like the viral procs more slowly, and the more heat is just going to like accelerate your damage very considerably anyhow. But yeah, this is what we're up to with Temple. Just doing, buffing ourselves up, casting pyrotechnics, just making enemies more vulnerable to crit, doing a bunch of red crits. Just getting in there with it. Like, your buff for your 3 also affects your allies, so you can just give your allies 750% heat, which is an immense amount. Of course, here's the Troublemaker Violence. A notable thing about this is that at least the crit buff will stick to them, I believe. I guess you'll get to see me use the Purgator a little bit. This build's not done, but it is just fine for dealing with that. We'll talk about the Purgator a little bit in another video. So a teaser for coming events of that completely unfinished build that's on the Purgator. We're actually probably going to get a couple levels for it in this mission. So if you're wondering how the Scalger weapons are, they have some potential. Yeah, mostly just showing off Flare here, though, of course. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is the Warframe for the new update. So, like, just to talk about a little bit, how is the new update? It's really good. I think that this update is fantastic. Little buggy in spots. Like, there's a few problems on, like, a couple of Warframe abilities. But they changed so many Warframes in this update that it's super unsurprising that there's just, like, a couple things here and there that are going to need to be hotfixed. And I'm really not torn up about it. I'm more than happy to wait a couple days for Baruch to do 200 million damage instead of 100 million damage. And I also don't think that he's too torn up about it either. So, yeah, that's, like, kind of where we are with things. The instant turn-on of the shields, though, and the big shield and, like, still building up adaptation and all this business that Temple is capable of. There's a lot here. And, like, obviously enemies aren't really a threat. Like, because you can just press 3, even off tempo, if you just press 3, you're invincible while casting it and your shields will come back on. Just whenever you are on tempo, then you also are invincible for additional time, which is just incredibly good. We're at 450 kill rate here. Obviously, if I was a little more focused on killing instead of talking, or like setting up in like a more specific area, that would probably be higher. But, I'm just kind of rooting around talking more so than anything else, which I think kind of speaks to the very solid kill power that Temple has just with like their kit as it stands. Because I mean, like, this is over what Ash is getting whenever I was like kind of focusing very specifically on setting up in a decent area so that Ash could really perform pretty well. And this is just kind of me rooting around in the tile set, and the kill rate is considerably above that. Like, especially for like effort in and then output out. I think that's also like worth noting, and I don't know what causes this, is your 3, even after we got nullified, it does tend to like keep your heat bonus for an unknown period of time of what you've built up on it. So even if like your 3 gets like nullified out, it seems like the like keeping up the bonus is like kind of generous. So like it's not like you can't ever let your 3 run out. If you do, you don't get just like immediately punished with like 500% less damage. And I don't know what the exact mechanics are behind that, but I do know that it feels really nice to not be insanely punished for like not realizing that your 3 went down to 0 seconds for a moment. That's all very good. But yeah, and like, I mean, the enemies have hurt my shields a few times, but nothing here has been too big a deal for Temple. I do think one of the things that would be really interesting, though might be, like, too insane, but I think it'd be very cool, is if while you are casting your 3, if you could, like, turn on your other abilities. Because, like, you can't hit, like, 1 and 2 and stuff while you're in your 3, but I think it'd be very cool to be able to, like, use the time while you're casting to tap your abilities. Like, that just feels like it kind of plays into the fantasy of this character, I think, more so than anything else. Probably actually wouldn't be used that much. It would just be super sick. You can see the burn down here. We'll use this a little bit. See the extra elements and stuff on here, but not doing like a crazy amount. Enemies who are status capped, like the Acolytes, obviously take good damage from Lizzie, but not anything like super insane. But you're also not under a super huge amount of threat from them because, as I said before, this is like the invincibility cannot be nullified. So even if you're against something like Violence, if you press 3, you're invincible for like 7 or so seconds. So like you're really not in much danger, especially if you just carry a gun that's not Lizzie, especially like a secondary, something like the Latum or just like, you know, just a raw damage killer that can really make short work of an Acolyte. You're really gonna have no problems whatsoever. At 8-minute-ish mark, we're at 750 kills or so, which is about to be expected. A little under 1,000 is like where we're usually going to be, especially in this situation. I have done like over 100 KPM with this, just kind of focusing on it a little more. But like, one of the things I will say about this Warframe is that it's very easy to get lost in like, hey, what if I just made the pyrotechnics go burr and everything was on fire and I just like stopped shooting Lizzie? Because it just is fun. Like, it's just a good time. I think the Temple is incredibly enjoyable to play as, even if they're not going to be like, you know, the most optimal thing in the world maybe to be running. They just have like a lot of advantages and they're very unique, which can't really ask for a lot more. Because I know people are going to ask in like the comments and stuff. Probably, I do think that Temple probably rates as like maybe like an A-, B+ tier-ish Warframe. Obviously, too easy to like really make any judgment calls like that. But that's like just kind of where I am on the current feels, and it's just good stuff. Okay, we're just about at that 10-minute mark. I do think that like they would be much more convenient though, if your 2 was a buff that affected you and not a debuff that affects enemies. Obviously, the debuff affecting enemies means your teammates get access to it and stuff like that. But for just general clear things, usually it's like not in like super worth it to you know, mark every enemy you're going to see with this effect. And most enemies, like, you know, obviously Acolytes and stuff you can mark with that, and it does help against them. But in general, it's kind of like a lot to do for that. But you do want to be casting kind of all the time, so if you don't want to cast your 1, throwing your 2 out there if there's a bunch of enemies in front of you is quite good. But yeah, that's 933 kills, so, you know, like 90 KPM, but like I said, it kind of impacted pretty heavily by me yapping, I think, with this Warframe, because like, turns out if you're not focusing on talking and saying all the information you want to say about this Warframe, you can focus a little bit more on aiming at the highest density of enemy placement. So that's on me. Oh, notable thing about the 3 though, you can cast it while aim gliding. If you have Lizzie out though, this is actually one of the weird things, is if you ADS, your abilities change. So you can't actually cast your 1 and 2 and stuff in the air if you're aim gliding without stopping your aim glide for a moment, which is not ideal because, as I said, you're probably not going to use like these very often. But it's not a huge deal. It's not like a deal breaker for the Warframe or something silly like that. You can see my 3 just ended, and if I turn it back on, it should be still like 600 or so %. It's still at 727%, which is really, really nice that that buff is like kind of maintained. But yeah, that's Temple/Flare/David Bowie, and I think they're great. Really good time, super enjoyable. I think that like There's a lot of people that are going to enjoy this frame a lot. I don't think they're going to be like hyper meta in specific for any given thing, but just like a really solid, unique design that I think is interesting for some design space stuff going forward. But yeah, that's going to do it. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Obviously, there's going to be videos every day for the foreseeable, pretty much, because we got a ton of builds to update. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to that, and I'll see you then. Goodbye. I'm also going to be obviously streaming like basically every day, so come check it out. Hey everybody, it's time to thank the patrons that are hanging around and supporting the channel. So, start with that. The $10 patrons are Athean, Alex Barnum, Arbiter Daydream, Barkus, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Candelathra, Blob World, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Harthorne, JC4 Science, Josh, Luzanth, Vicotel, Michta, Nerve, Ruby, Sanyu, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Wowdad01, and Zerafir. Also, thanks, of course, to all of the other patrons for supporting the channel. It is much appreciated. It's a little sneak peek on what we're getting into. There's going to be a lot more of these kind of big re-reviews of weapon types and their new builds and stuff as things changed a lot at the end of last year. And of course, there's also planned new free-to-play before we get into any more big updates. So look forward to that.